Thank you for being here this afternoon, and we'll spend, as I normally do, I think this is my 268th town hall, and folks ask me in Washington why I do so many. I ask why you do so few to some of my colleagues, because if you don't listen to people, and how can you represent them? So I'll spend just a few minutes at the beginning, they'll give you a quick update, but most of the time will be with questions, comments. I'd even take a few solutions. Because we do have a few big problems to solve. We've got $18 trillion of debt, and it's getting bigger every day. They're kind of excited in Washington, D.C. It's only going to be a $500 billion deficit this year, and so I guess that's progress. But we have a long ways to go, and it's going to get worse as we go forward. We can talk about that. We can also talk about veterans issues. If there are any veterans here, I want to thank you for your service. I apologize if the VA has failed you. I've been serving on the VA committee for 4 years, and we made some progress last summer, I think, providing some more options for our veterans and their families. But we have a long ways to implement that. I actually had a back and forth with the Secretary of VA last week where he agreed that particularly if you live in rural areas, you should have more choices than driving a long way to a VA hospital. And so we'll keep working on that. I also serve on the Small Business Committee. And 2/3 of all new jobs are created by small businesses, which is a lot like our district, which is what predominates out here. And but I fear many folks in Washington are more worried about Wall Street than Main Street. And you see that in a lot of policies and regulations. I spend a lot of time fighting regulations. It seems like to me when I talk to large companies, I mean, they're kind of willing to, and able to roll with the regulatory punches. It's the small guys, the small gals who have a much more difficult time, whether it's dealing with Obamacare or EPA regulations or take your pick, because those make it more difficult for our businesses to continue to grow and prosper. And so I spent a lot of time on that. And issue that's front and center is the issue of Fort Riley, and issue about ISIL and radical Islam terrorists. And we will probably hopefully face some of that debate when I return next week to Washington. And you're probably asking, well, okay, what are you doing here in the middle of the week? Huelskamp, aren't you supposed to be at work? This, I will note, is our first week. We've been out of Washington since January. I come back and forth every week, but this is the first actual week we're at home. So I'm out here to listen, and I'm going to open up to you and see what your questions and comments might be on any and all matters. Seeing none, I guess we're done. No. No. Let's go ahead and open it up.
Congressman.
Yes, sir.
Mayor Jim Thatcher. I got a couple issues here that I would really like your assistance with. One of them, in 2008, our city was struck with a real heavy ice storm, and we had to do a complete, basically, upgrade of our electrical grid system within the city. Of course, we got FEMA funding, you know, and we followed all of the stringent criteria that they required us to do to perform this work. And it was like $7 million bill, wasn't it?
Yeah. Wow.
This is Don Button, he sits on our Public Utilities Commission. We did it. We got it complete within the time frame allotted. We did all the paperwork, and for some reason they want to hold our last payment to the sum of $578,225.42. Now, we put in a appeal in January of, January of 2014, first appeal. FEMA's required to respond back to us in 90 days. Well, now we're in January 2015.
Oh, wow.
And still no response.
Okay.
What this does is this has put a $500,000 burden on the citizens of Clay Center and actually the surroundings. We service a surrounding area and in a small community of Idana also, because we own our own utility. Okay. And if there's anything that you could do on your end, because we're absolutely doing everything we can on our end. We actually hired a lawyer from Washington, D.C., and he's doing what he can, but again, we're trying to deal with FEMA here. You know, okay. So if there's any way you could assist this community on this FEMA issue, it'd be greatly appreciated. Okay. Well,
Mr. Mayor, we'll be happy to look in that. I haven't heard of the subject before, but I've got some staff here. Let's follow up with that, and we'll work with Senator Roberts and Moran's office, see if they've made a call. And you know, a lot of what we do in Washington, you might say, well, they're going to pass a bill, but a lot of the work has to do with talking to these agents, say, hey, wait a minute, this is what you should be doing. You should be following the law. And these last payments with FEMA have been a problem on some of our rural electric co-ops and some of these things in ice storms. So I've heard of that, and we've had to work with them on some of those things. So but let's look on that, Mr. Mayor. I understand the difficulties of Washington moving slowly, and $500 plus $1,000 is a big pill for the city to swallow.
4,500 people to swallow.
Yeah, oh, absolutely so. But Ashley's here and Josh is here, and see if we'll get back to you on that right away. Okay. Yeah, we pick up the phone and call. They may not always give us the right answer, but agencies don't like me to call, and like anybody to call, and they still respond a little bit to some pressure there. So let's see if we get the bottom of that.
Good, thank you.
You got a second issue too?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, let's do that.
Keystone Pipeline.
Keystone. That might impact your electricity rates here, wouldn't it? So, yeah. The Keystone Pipeline will be sent to the president on next week. I'm not sure what day. It went through the House, another version went through the Senate. We compromised and sent a version to the president. It's not the perfect bill. It's not the perfect situation, but it'll be on his desk. Will he veto it? He may not. He doesn't have much exercise in doing a veto. He's not used to that. And so I think there are ways to compromise with him, even if he does veto it. Maybe we can find a way to move forward on that. I think it's critical to our national security. It's also going to create jobs. People argue about how many jobs it would create. One's enough for me. I mean, we need more American jobs and good, hard construction jobs. So we will find out next week probably what he's going to do with it.
And so everybody in this room understands what the Keystone Pipeline means to the city of Clay Center. They actually put a pump station within our service area, and we will sell all of the electricity to that pump station. That pump station has 4 6,500 horsepower electric motors. The pump station will use 2.5 times more electricity than the entire city of Clay Center uses. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When you're able to provide and sell power like that in bulk, that means we're able to buy our energy cheaper. Does that make sense? Because it's a reliable need for energy. I mean, I don't want to throw too many numbers out there, but in selling the electricity to this pump station, the city will actually get a subsidy fee, just like everybody else in this room pays a subsidy fee to the city. Keystone Pipeline will pay the subsidy fee also. And they know that, they're aware of that, and they're more than willing to do that. So what that does also too is it'll put some relief on the taxpaying citizens of Clay Center that will possibly bring down our mill levies, and it'll definitely bring down our cost of energy. So it's a real big deal for the city. It really is. So.
Well, we're watching that, and we'll continue to provide pressure. We've already cast our vote for it multiple times. We also do use social media and otherwise put some pressure on the White House. Say, hey, let's move forward. And so thanks for the reminder how important it is to the city here. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can you override his veto if he does?
The current numbers would suggest no. We were 10 votes about, roughly, I'm trying to remember the exact vote count, short in the House. That we were 4 votes short in the Senate. But we put a number of things in there the Democrats wanted. But at least we're having votes. You know, for the last 4 years I've been up there, we'd send things out of the House, and then never go anywhere. At least now they're going through the Senate. Now the Senate is very, very slow. It took them 3 weeks to work that bill. They actually, in one day, I think, did more amendments on that one bill than Harry Reid allowed for the whole year before that. And so I think debate and amendment is critical. It helps us be more accountable. So
that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you, is when you added to that bill or put the pork barrel in the bill, whatever you want to call it, is there enough there in your mind that the president will pass it?
On the edge. I mean, again, he's had to very rarely make that hard decision to veto. He could not veto it. He could sign it. There are a few options. So, but you know, when you have, I think the president's pretty liberal, and when you have your best liberal buddies chaining themselves to the front of the White House fence over that issue, I mean, that's kind of who he caters to. But we had a meeting about 2 years ago with the president of the Republican conference, and he came in there, and that's one of the ishes came up. He said, "Hey, how can we work together?" And we were like, "Well, how about Keystone? That'll create jobs in everybody's congressional district or a lot of districts." And well, he said, "You got to understand my position." Again, this the president says, "You know, we got people in this room, Republicans, that want to build the pipeline, really, really want to build it." And he said, "You got people on the other side that think it's going to destroy the environment." And he said, "You got me, President Barack Obama, right in the middle." Well, I really disagree. He's not right in the middle. He's right on the side with environmentalists. So we'll see. And it could be 2 or 3 weeks before we see what the response is. If there's a veto, we'll might try a veto override. We might try and send him another bill. Yes, sir.
Is there any chance that it'll ever get the interest rates up so the old people can make some money on the money we put away for our old age? Some of them are running out of money in the nursing home right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, is there any chance? I think there's a very good possibility,
No,
but it's hard to tell when. And,
well, I have to wait till I'm 100 then.
yeah, what are you, 99 or what? Where are you at?
I'm 91.
You could wait for a while. These are really unusual. This really never happened before, that we printed this much money and poured it into the economy, and it's still, for the last 6 years, it's been pretty well flat nationwide. And so they've been pumping money in there. The demand is down, the money's up. Usually that led to a lot of inflation, but inflation hadn't happened, economic growth hadn't happened, but they've been pouring money in and stimulating the economy. Usually that led to higher interest rates, but I think there are a number of arguments that businesses have just decided they're going to stay, not do much until things turn around.
We got one more problem here. Apparently, our state of Kansas doesn't have enough money, so they're going to have to look for some more money to pay the schools, to pay this, to pay that, and everything. And their governor, you know, has stopped the income tax. And now they tell me that if you own some land and some property, we're going to pay it. We're going to pay it more than...
Yeah, there was a proposal by a state senator from Johnson County, which is no surprise, I guess, but to eliminate use value for farmland, if I understand the bill. I was up in Topeka visiting with a few folks about other issues, but it doesn't seem like that's going to go much anywhere. But that's up to the folks in Topeka. But that would have to be voted on the House and Senate, and the governor would make that happen. So. Yes, sir.
What should be this nation's involvement with the ISIS threat?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. I'm very troubled by, obviously, what's going on. I'm also very troubled by our involvement now. We do have men and women from Fort Riley on the ground. I will say near Baghdad. I can say that. Where else they're at, I'm not able to. Last week, I was able to participate in a private intelligence briefing on the issue. I can say I think we're doing much better than the media's reporting, but that's notwithstanding some of the tragic, horrible, barbaric things they've done to get attention. And these people, they're savages, as Bob Dole put it. And but I tell you, the battle, they've been after us for about 1,000 years. They hate Western civilization, these radical Islamic elements, and you should call it what it is. I think the president's doing us a disservice by not calling it out what it is, but it's not new. These folks over the history, starting in 1,000 years ago, have been pushing into Europe, and they lost, and you go through that long history. So, but the question is, what is our involvement? And I need the president to identify our national security interests there. And his authorization for military force he sent to us last week does not identify that interest, does not identify a strategy for defeat, just says, hey, give me a blank check, and the next president a blank check for 3 years, and it's unclear what they're going to do with it. So, but I don't think that authorization for use of military force is going to pass. I'm glad he presented it to us. That's the responsibility of Congress to declare war, not the president. But we're still waiting for more details, and my classified briefing didn't provide any more details to answer the entrance strategy, the exit strategy. How do we know if we won? I'm like you. I don't want to sit in another country for another 20 years, 40 years, 100 years. Let's define how we win, and let's just go get it done. And that's basically what the soldiers tell me as well. Just tell us what we're going to do, but we'd like to know how we win, short term and long term. I do say in that area, our best allies are the Kurds, and America hasn't been very nice to the Kurds. They've been kind of the stepsister over there, but they're the ones that are actually doing the best job on the ground outside of our soldiers. So it's about as clear as mud over there, which worries me. And hopefully we'll learn more as the president and his folks identify what their strategy is. Yes,
well, it seems to me like they're sending some troops over there so they can say they sent troops, but are they enough to do any good?
They are
just so they can cover their.
Yeah. They are doing good. I mean, they are making progress. Where the ISIL folks had come from, they have been pushed back some. Or is this the president talks about a kind of a containment strategy. It's unclear what the strategy is. But the folks in Baghdad that come from Fort Riley, the big red ones sitting there, and they are having success. And but you think that all the money we spent over there, all the men and women who gave their lives over there, we're trying to take back territory or help the Allies take back territory that we had not long ago. The Iraqi government's got to step up. I mean, they have their own problems. If you think Muslims get along with each other, all they do is look at these countries. So, Sunnis and the Shia, and it just goes on and on over there. But that is no surprise. That's the way it's been for generations, even amongst Muslims in that area. But one thing we can't forget, that these folks, ISIL and the like, and Al-Qaeda, which seems less of a threat than the ISIL, but they hate Jews. They're anti-Semitic. They hate Israel. If they had their way, they would destroy Israel. They'd take over the entire Middle East, and that's not a new goal. That's been a goal for 1,000 years. So, but we can come in on top of that is we need a clear strategy. But the president has been suggesting it's not been a long-term battle with the West, but I really think he's wrong on that. So. Yes, sir.
Congressman, I'm Bob Mullen. I'm the interim CEO at Clay County Medical Center. I've been here about a month, and I think the biggest thing I see for rural hospital are two things: is the physician supervision rule for therapy, and I think there's some movement on that, from what I understand. The other is the sequester cuts to critical access hospitals. We're struggling mightily now, and any more cuts are just going to make it worse. Clay County has been fortunate. Their mill levy hasn't increased in several years. It's $500,000, which I can tell you is probably pretty low in most rural hospitals in Kansas. I've been in several as an interim. So I just think, I think you understand it, but it's hard to get the point across to people in cities that there's going to be hospitals in Kansas closed if there's not something done about keeping the reimbursement level where it is or gradually increasing it. And it's not fair to put it on the back of local taxpayers every year to support a hospital. This hospital has 200 employees, $18 million budget, which probably makes it the largest employer in the county, if not in the top 2 or 3. And so anything you can do to help rural hospitals is going to be greatly appreciated.
Appreciate that, and the gentleman raises some really important points of the sequester, which passed in summer of 2011. I didn't vote for that bill, and I think a lot of folks, I guess, to explain their vote, didn't think it ever happened, and it did, in part because we have such a sorry fiscal state as it is. But its impact on local hospitals, and you didn't mention, but the Obamacare as well, the reimbursements under Obamacare, they're going to come down to the Medicaid level, and the director will tell you here, if it's at the Medicaid level, we don't survive. I'm worried about those Medicare cuts as part of Obamacare, which is baked into that, and that's going to impact our rural hospitals. And then the over-regulatory issue about supervision. I mean, they're asking for physician supervision of things I would argue most physicians haven't done since medical school. You got to have a physician present, I think, to put an IV in. Yeah. Most doctors I talk to says, well, that's what the nurse does. What do I have to do with it? You know, it's the idea. Somebody in Baltimore, Maryland is where the agency that oversees the hospital. They have hospitals with thousands of doctors. How many physicians do you have?
I think there are 8 local physicians.
Okay.
And Clay Center's fortunate. I did an interim in Lincoln about a year ago, and they had basically one doctor up there. Yeah. And he can't be everywhere at one time. Yeah. What amazes me is that at Wesley Medical Center, you can have a doctor who it takes him longer to get to the site where the procedure's being done than it does that doctor in Lincoln or Clay Center to walk across the street.
That's a great point.
You got to have supervision. Yeah. There's no.
Yeah. You got to have supervision on site.
Right.
I had a case in another hospital where they had a basically workout area for rehabilitation, and you couldn't let a patient walk on the treadmill unless the doctor was there watching. Yeah. That's just stupid. Yeah. And so we've sent letters to them. I think House could have got something through the House. I can't remember if we did, but the Senate didn't want to consider that. So when the appropriations bill comes through, we'll use the power of the purse and says, let's get rid of this rule and put some common sense back on that. So we're pushing on that and recognize that. I am blessed with a lot of things, including the most community hospitals of any district in the country. So I will say what I've been trying to do on the VA ties together well. I have just met with the Kansas Hospital Association, I believe, last week and trying to make certain that if veterans want to go to the local hospital, let's make it happen. And all the hospitals say, yes, let's make it happen. The problem is over at the VA. And so if a veteran would like to choose a doctor, choose the hospital, let's let them do that. I visited with the VA secretary last week, both privately and publicly, said we need to expand that and say, hey, make that a choice of the veteran. Our hospitals are looking for more patients. Now, if you go to other areas of the country, I have a colleague in northern Arizona, and she said, we have one hospital for the whole district. And I said, well, we got 70 of them. But we have no VA hospital. And we make them drive all the way over to VA hospital, and we oftentimes make them drive by a half a dozen or more community hospital. So
And I would
trying to-
argue that Carolina Rural Hospital is probably better than most VA hospitals, if not all.
I think so
It's just
as
Bob
well.
Mullins'
Yeah.
opinion on that.
Yeah.
But I've been in VA hospitals. My father-in-law was in one, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's pretty sad.
Yeah, and what we hear from veterans is if they ever make it in the door, and that's the problem,
Yeah.
and they get hooked up with a doctor, they like that consistency. But darn it, I received notification from a constituent in Dodge City, Kansas, who was driving all the way to Kansas City. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a 340-mile drive to see a cardiologist. He says, "Can I like drive to somewhere in Dodge or drive to Hayes or to Garden City?" VA says, "No, we can't do that." And I told the VA secretary, if we can't make that work, then we need someone else to be doing the job for us. So, okay, so appreciate that, and I think that's critical, the issues you raise.
Congressman,
Yes.
you mentioned Fort Riley, you know, when you first, I was at that same town hall meeting and, or not town hall meeting, but the same
Yeah.
meeting, yeah. And first off, I'd like to say that they did a really good job at presenting Fort Riley, Junction City, Manhattan area. I thought they really did a good job. I guess, in your feeling, does NBAF and being such close proximity to Fort Riley help Fort Riley's cause any?
I don't think so. I don't see much connection visiting with the fort and visiting with the folks there and how that works. There's plenty of other factors that I think make Fort Riley unique. It's, you know, being close to K-State's been helpful, and having support in the region, the community, having 100,000 plus acres to do exercises on. It's almost, compared to ever more than anywhere else in the country in terms of the access and growth. So they got a lot of unique things going. NBAF is going to happen, but doesn't seem to be much of a connection there. But the issue underlying NBAF is the protection from biological terrorism. That's kind of was the initial push from Senator Roberts that got the discussion started on that. So at the basis, it's protection of our food supply. I think that's part of our national security. So, but as far as what the DOD is considering, that doesn't seem to be entering in their calculation at all. Questions?
Tim, we know that
Yes.
government has no money. It seems like they've got enough money to help a man become a woman. Is there anything you can do to stop that iniquity?
Yeah, they spend money on all kinds of things. A lot of things I don't know about. I think I read something about that. So that your Medicare dollars, or maybe your prison dollars, or your Obamacare, some of those things. So,
And then
but,
the paper said the Army is going to pay for it or something.
oh, the Army. Oh,
That's what, I think that's what I read.
Yeah.
Well, he was a soldier, I guess. Manning. Was he a soldier at one time? Manning?
I don't know.
Yes.
Oh.
I
Yeah.
think she was a soldier.
Anyway, I don't want her broke and spend
Yeah.
stuff on foolish shit
Yeah.
like that.
Well, in a ways, talk a little bit about Topeka at the beginning. You know, the one good thing about Topeka and the city is cash basis. You can't run a deficit. You got to pay your bills. In Washington, there's something called a printing press, or as they tell me now, they don't print money at all. They just push a keyboard, a key on the keyboard to make that happen. There's just way too many folks in Washington just think, well, we got as much money as we can print. And that's why you can run a $500 billion deficit, and folks say, hey, we've improved, we're getting better. See, when I was first elected, it was 1.3 trillion. Now we've reduced the deficit to 500 billion. That's progress. Well, it's going to get worse soon, because you see that around your community, see around my community. Folks are getting older, and every day in America, they estimate for the next 30 years, 10,000 more Americans are qualified for Social Security and Medicare. Every single day as the baby boomers move through. To say your federal government didn't save money for that, and they didn't. They've known for years it's going to happen and have not planned ahead. So you think we put our money where our priorities are, and I would say
Well,
that's
I'm more
not my
concerned
priorities.
about what they're doing with the money in this case than I am the money
Oh,
itself.
I agree. There's a different philosophy of some folks in Washington, or a lot of them, and I disagree with that. So. What else on your mind? Oh, Roger has the list. He hadn't even started down it yet. Bring up one other issue dealing with amnesty that's in the news. Just to give you a little history on that one. Here's some information. A couple years, this is from last year. Remember the president in June of 2012 had issued an amnesty order. And I just want to tell you what happened to the number of folks coming across the border. That was an amnesty for those that identify themselves as minors. I mean, when he issued that order, then the numbers just started going up. Just think about that. If you're talking about amnesty again, when the president got shot down, at least temporarily, in the courts a couple of days ago, that's an encouragement to folks to come across the border. That's certainly what happened in 2012. So we'll deal with that again next week with our funding and our lack thereof of the Department of Homeland Security, what happens with the president's illegal and constitutional amnesty. As one of my colleagues says, you know, if we don't stand up to the president, stand up for the Constitution on this one, what's next? Where will he stop with his executive orders? You know, I see that all the way down to the FEMA level, all the way down to the HHS level, where, well, too bad if Congress wants that. We're going to do whatever we would like to do and challenge you to stop it. You know, whether it's regulation or taking over the internet, or whether it's the amnesty issue. So that's a really big one, and it's not just about immigration, which is a huge mess for many years. It's a question of who makes the laws, and I agree with the president when he said 22 times he didn't have the authority to do an amnesty, and now he has attempted to do that. So, yes?
There were people that ran for office on the platform of repealing Obamacare. Is that dead in the water? Is anybody really trying to do that anymore, or are we just going to have to swallow that and live with it?
It's still out there. The Congress in December after the election, a majority of the House and Senate chose to fund Obamacare for the rest of the year. And I thought that was an unwise decision, especially those who need to do something different. As we go forward on Obamacare, there's a possibility of the House and Senate to pass something called a reconciliation, which is insider baseball language, which is very confusing. That would be an attempt to repeal parts or all of Obamacare. It would not take 60 votes in the Senate, which is why that's under consideration. But in the meantime, there's a Supreme Court decision about the subsidy issue, and we'll see what the federal court does with that in the Burwell decision, or Burwell case, which could really upset the apple cart of Obamacare. But I'm not planning on anything. I did not have the opportunity to go to the meeting, but Justice Scalia met with a few congressmen about 2 weeks ago. And he was asked about these issues about the executive authority and what Congress does and what's the court going to do about it. And Justice Scalia says, don't look to us to save you from doing your job. At the end of the day, it's Congress that has the power of the purse if they choose to use it. And that's the best way to get people's attention, is all about the money. So no dollar can be spent without an appropriation of Congress.
Who's going to win out on the WOTUS issue? Is EPA still hasn't let that die?
Oh, the waters of the U.S., and that's again another big regulatory threat that I don't know, to answer your question. So, but let me give a little history on that topic. Clean Water Act was passed when I was before I was in school, I think. And at that time, they decided to limit the control of Washington to navigable waters, which basically means a river or a lake. You know, if it's not navigable, if it's a road ditch or a farm pond or a swimming pool, that wouldn't be regulated by the folks in Washington. But they decided, they've tried this before, to expand, change the definition of navigable to mean about any drop of water, and that's what they're doing now. And I had a hearing on my small business committee where we had the EPA in there, and I said, hey, here's a picture from western Kansas. And if anybody's been out to western Kansas and familiar with it, you know it's a very unusual picture because there's water in the road ditch. And this is north of Mineola, a little town which we used to play in football and basketball. By the way, my hometown's that way. But my staff stopped, took a picture of it. I said, is this a navigable stream? He said, well, I don't know. I said, well, I need to know, because are you going to regulate this? And he wouldn't answer the question. He wasn't able to answer the question. I said, well, this road ditch, the water, if there's enough of it, goes through Mineola and eventually it'll drain in the Clark County State Lake about 30 miles away, which is a navigable. And under your argument, any waters that might ever end up in a stream and lake need to be regulated by Washington. And so I would argue, yes, they're going to regulate that. That means they regulate all the land over here and all the land over there. question is, right now, we don't know what's going to happen with it. Even if they finalize that rule and get by with it, there's going to be court decisions. There'll be regulators coming out that may or may not know how to impact that or how to interpret that. Just going to be a lot more uncertainty and a lot more regulation. So as we see from them right now, they plan on finalizing that rule, and it could be really devastating on our Kansas farmers and ranchers and cities, and folks that never before were impacted by federal regulators of water. So Kansas Farm Bureau and others have a Ditch the Rule hashtag. We like to use that as well. So we're going to keep pushing back. Congress can easily stop that. Maybe it's not easy, but they can stop it simply by putting something in a spending bill that says thou shalt not implement this proposed regulation. So that's one reason I didn't want to fund the government until October when we had these outstanding issues on regulation or over-regulation. Deadly silence.
Well, there's so much good news, you know, it's just, we're overwhelmed.
Yeah, overwhelmed?
That's it.
Yeah, well, the good news is, despite the best efforts of Washington, I mean, our economy here in Kansas continues to grow. Nationally, it's been flatlined, but there is some good news out there, and some folks find it controversial, and I get some of the opposition. But we are currently seeing negotiations going on with much of Europe and much of Asia, and trying to open up more markets for Kansas goods and others as well. And I was at the White House last week for a signing of a VA bill. By the way, my 13-year-old asked, did you ask Michelle about the school lunch program? I did not. Didn't come up. But we were there for a veterans bill, but I talked to staff there. I said, you know, if you're going to, as we negotiate these agreements for trade, I want to make sure Kansas agriculture and agriculture in general is taken care of. And because I think we can meet, beat, and compete and sell stuff around the world that's growing right here. And so that's long-term. You won't see a big immediate spike, but long-term, that's good for Kansas agriculture and our rural economies. And I think those type of opportunities mean our communities have opportunities for prosper and growth, and give our kids a reason to stay closer to home. So I think that's good. We keep our hospitals open and keep our schools going and those kind of things. I think we're doing much better in other areas of the country.
I would like to see I guess you call it PR, to let the general public know that there's money comes into our federal government every day to actually run the government. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, every day.
Yeah. You know, there's always cash flow, but last year was we had more dollars into Washington than ever before. Problem was, spending was higher than ever before.
Exactly. That's my point.
And so the deficit, and this has been a problem for a long time. I mean, it was under, I think it was under Dwight D. Eisenhower, last time they had 2 years back-to-back that the spending actually went down. That was a long time ago. And by the way, Ike faced a lot of heat for doing that. After the war, he came down because we didn't need that massive military presence. Remember his going away speech? Military-industrial complex, that came from Ike. But that's how, since then, that's how long we've had these deficits been going on and on. So I got asked the question in Marysville last town hall earlier today. I said, well, when is too much too much? You know, we'll know it when we see it. I thought 18 trillion would be too much. And so, but it's going to get prospectively worse under the president's budget. The deficits went down to $500 billion this year, but in a few years they'll be back up maybe close to the $1 trillion range again, which is unsustainable. There's no way we can do that. So, but the revenues are still going up, and spending is as well. Yes.
I think Republicans can come up with anybody in 2016 that can beat Hillary.
Yeah, that's what elections are for. I think there's going to be a lot of candidates, and some of them I know, some of them I don't. And what I'm telling the people that ask and care what I think, and there's not many, I just say, talk about your goal, your vision for the future. What can we say is hopeful out there? What are we going to do? How do we talk about the big things? Now, if we talk about the small things about hair color and the spouse, and this and that, and we miss the big things, I think Republicans, being partisan, don't have a chance of winning that. We've got to say what we're for and how we're going to restore America to its greatness. And I think we can. It's going to take work. We've had some tough times before. And, you know, under Ike, we came in there and had we had some historically high deficits because of the war, but we paid those down. we were able to do that. And so we can start doing that again. I think we're going to have to. So, yeah, there's a lot of folks I think personally I'd prefer over Hillary. I think about all of them. So that's my opinion. But there'll be a real battle. So
I think the problem is, you know, Romney was right when he said it's hard to win the battle talking about taxes when you have 49% of the people that don't pay taxes. And I'm guessing probably in Obama's years in office, we have more people not paying taxes or getting more money from the government now than we did in 2012.
yeah.
And it is hard to win on that argument.
Well, it is, and I tell Republicans you might think outside your inside the Beltway box. You know, there's other issues we don't talk about, issues that young people care about. People care about liberty. They care about the fact that, you know, if your emails, well, make sure and open up your emails quick enough. If your emails sit on your server for more than 90 days, your federal government can come in without a warrant and read your emails. They've been doing that for years. They can do that. I think that's wrong. I think it's wrong that the NSA is spying on this young lady here. She doesn't look too radical to me, but they're tracking all your phone calls. They may not listen to all of them, but it's those kind of issues that young folks who may not be paying taxes yet, but have a massive amount of debt, tell them, hey, I think most of them are saying, what's the future hold for us? And that is a really big question. So you come out of K-State and go to maybe grad school or don't, and you come out with 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, take $1,000 worth of debt. Then you say, federal government has all this debt too. And by the way, you young folks, you got to pay it all off. And somebody will have to bear the burden of that. So we need to give them some hope, talk about some issues they care about, and I think a lot of Washington doesn't do that. I will give the president credit for that. When he was in his campaign, he talked about a lot of issues that he really couldn't do anything about. But somehow he convinced people it was really important to him. So I think we need to be out listening more. Like I said at the beginning, I've done, this is my 270th town hall. I can't remember what the count is. But if more of my colleagues spend time out listening, then they'd hear those kind of things. And that's what I tell presidential candidates that ask me about or looking around and say, well, make sure you're listening to somebody outside the Beltway, because that's critical. Yes, sir.
Are you going to be able to keep the FCC out of the internet?
Yeah. I do not know. Answer your question. The FCC wants to create a department of the internet that would control that. I think that's the last folks we want to put in charge of the internet. But Congress, we can write letters, and we do that. FEMA, we can call them into hearings, which is going to take place, I think, this week on that. And we can cut off their money. But the FCC and other agencies are not very connected to the budgetary process. But we can stop that through the power of the purse with the FCC. But again, we can't do that basically until October in a must-pass bill. So it remains to be seen how far they're going to go with that. I agree. Yeah, that to me is become the epitome of what happens when you get government out of the way. It's good and bad things on there. I get worried. I got young kids. With the idea of how you can connect and not have to worry about the government controlling everything you do. I mean, it's pretty scary what they would like to do. And as I see it, there's some very large corporations would love to have the government control it so they can control that as well.
But this young lady brought up Hillary. The best thing we as Republicans can do is not make a fatal mistake this time. You had better put the right person in there and not some wannabe. We got too many people in the wagon and not enough of them pulling it.
Yeah.
And that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Your chart there proved that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not a good way.
Yeah. No,
It's
I
going to
agree.
break this great country.
Yeah. Well, you know, rolling back, just speaking a little Republican politics or presidential politics, you know, people might think back and think Ronald Reagan did all these great things as governor and that somehow made him president. But no, before he made president, he spent 10 years traveling the country, talking to people, listening, going to factory, and he was on a speaking tour and listening tour, and he understood people. I think we got a lot of Republicans and Democrats running for president and not running for president that just don't do that much. It's become a different world, different rules for one than the rest of us. So, but for the record, I am on Obamacare. Yeehaw. My wife complains about it all the time. Why did you pick that plan? I got assigned to it. And so I want to make sure others have choices. I don't think a veteran should only be able to go to one hospital. But think about that. I see a few folks in here on Medicare. I won't point you out. But can you imagine if there was a department in Medicare that said you would go to one hospital is all you're allowed to go to in the whole state? or none in the district, and said everybody would drive miles. That's what we do with our veterans. We can do better than that. And so I think most of the American spirit is we can do better. They know it's not going to be perfect. And that should be our message, whether it's here or elsewhere, that we can do better. We can fix the VA. We're not going to make it perfect. But if we give a choice to go to your local hospital, I'm gathering veterans are going to pick the local hospital. Some may not. That's up to them. One more question. When Ashley says one more question, there's just one more question. Yeah, any additional questions, comments? Didn't quite hear all the answers I was looking for, but.
What I was wondering is where have these hearings gone about holding the IRS accountable for being an intimidation agency?
Yeah.
Where does that stand now?
We've had the hearings. I think it's kind of been the inside fastball, kind of a brushback from them going after other folks. But we have still yet to identify who was really behind that, and we haven't held people accountable, like Lois Lerner, and she's been held in, I think, contempt of Congress, as was Eric Holder. Unless we're willing to follow through on that. We did reduce the IRS budget, and the appropriations just went through, first time in a long time. Of course, they're using that to say it's going to take a while for them to service your tax return. For most of us, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think it was 2 weeks ago, there was another big release of papers and emails from the administration. The Oversight and Government Reform Committee is still investigating that. But I think it's wrong, whether you're Republican or Democrat, liberal, independent, conservative. The federal government shouldn't be using the IRS to target opponents, and I really believe that's what's happening. And I think that's wrong. And so the investigations will continue. Can we pass a bill? Yeah, it's already against the law to target political opponents. The question is, did they do it? And until somebody goes to jail or loses their job over that, or enough people, it will continue. But for the insider fastball, I think we're not hearing the reports of that as we were before 2 years ago. All right. Well, appreciate the questions, appreciate the comments, appreciate your concern about the future, and appreciate the work here in the city. Whatever we can do to help. Got a couple staff here. Ashley works for you in Salina. She works really hard. And if you have any questions or concerns we can help you solve, please let us know. I'm always willing to pick up the phone and call an agency. I also ask you to sign up for our electronic newsletter about once a week. My staff does a great job of updating you on my votes. Whether you like my votes or not, you deserve to know what they are. You deserve to know. I always think it's interesting when you, especially during the VA hearings, to provide a video of something I was told by the VA. So notice that outrageous claims they made. And I think the fact those videos were going out there in the district and elsewhere, it pushed the VA to do something. Pushed the president to do something. He fired 2 or 3 secretaries over that deal, and we're still moving forward. So please sign up for that electronic newsletter. As I mentioned, as we started with a prayer, please pray for our nation. Pray for wisdom for our leaders, our president, and pray for wisdom for me and my wife and our 4 kids. We live in Kansas, so I go back and forth a lot. Every week I'm in session, I'm always coming home. So please keep our family in prayers. That's pretty tough on us. But appreciate your efforts, and thank you for being here today. Thank you, and God bless you.